Let's listen to what Mr. Neil de Grasse Tyson, who also met Prime Minister Modi on day one of Prime Minister Modi's first state visit to the US. Let's listen to what Mr. Tyson had to say.
I was delighted to spend time in the company of a head of state who is as scientifically thoughtful as is Prime Minister Modi. So many leaders of the world, I think their priorities might be out of balance with what it needs to be going into the 21st century. With all of the challenges we have in civilization, the solutions are going to come from innovations in science and technology and engineering and math. And it's very clear to me that he cares about all of this. Obviously, he reserved his conversations about space for me, and I guess Elon was here a few minutes before I got here. But it's clear that space matters quite a bit to the Prime Minister. And I reminded him that space is a kind of a gateway field in the sense that we all love to watch a rocket launch. Okay, so now you say, well, where's the rocket going? Oh, it's going to Mars. Oh, I care about rocks on Mars, so it'll attract a geologist. Oh, we're going to look for life on Mars. It'll attract a biologist. Well, we need an engineering camera. We'd get the engineers. And so all of these branches of science issue forth from an interest in space. And Prime Minister Modi knows this. So I was delighted to hear about future programs that he has in mind, where to stimulate curiosity among children, school children. The school children are already curious. I made sure to drive that home, and I think he knew that. But how do you retain curiosity going forward? And so he has plans to build these curiosity centers. He had a different word for it, I forgot. Places where your kids come and they just play, but they're playing with things that explore nature, or the laws of physics, or chemistry, or biology. Therefore, the natural world becomes the playground, not just some toy made by a toy manufacturer. That's a form of playing, but if as a child you're playing with things that matter in nature, you're going to end up a different kind of adult. You might even end up as a scientist.
Well. Some people end up as scientists, and some are here in the studio helping you understand what scientists are trying to tell you. We have Mr. Rakesh Khan continuing to be with us, and we also have Mr. Karan Bhasin now joining us on the broadcast. Rakesh, I'm going to come to you in just a bit. I'll just take this to Karan, who's just joined us in the broadcast. Karan, talk to us. What do you make of Mr. Neil de Grasse Tyson's word? Everything begins from space, and Prime Minister Modi knows the importance of space.
Interestingly, if we go back to the pandemic, one of the things that the government did at that time was open the space sector, largely because there was a feeling that, we have restricted access to this sector. There's a lot of innovation that happens here, a lot of which, has implications for industrial production, manufacturing processes, etc. So I suspect somewhere the idea that the government has is that, of course, there are spin-off benefits to greater role of private sector in a high-tech area such as space. And there's also a push that the government is giving towards, more tech, more science and, R&D investments that private sector makes and even the public sector matches. So I suspect that the interaction that they had probably focused a lot on where Indian science is at the moment and where it should go going forward. So I think it would have been nevertheless, it would have been an exciting conversation. And unfortunately, only these two people know what was the contours of the conversation.
Right. Stay with us, Karan. Rakesh ji, another fascinating aspect, even as we discuss the economics and the importance of business when it comes to that relationship between India and the US. Space is another facet that's also very important, be it from the perspective of Elon Musk and SpaceX's investments in India, and in general, cooperations in space.
Krishna, right, before I get to space, I think Nassim Taleb has made some very, very interesting observations about Modi. Put together, both of them lend a very, very strong, vocal, robust, intellectual and scientific heft to brand Modi. something that he's accused of, not being formally educated at the top. I think it's a slap on those who criticize him for lack of great formal management education. The guy has a vision, let's face it, has his own shortcomings like any other great statesman, but he has a vision for India and for the world. Remember, people like Raghuram Rajan, who is himself a known economist, criticized India for, mismanaged allegedly in COVID and pushed for UBI. There was this great demand for cash to be invested in the hands of citizens of this country. And remember what Nasif said. He specifically mentioned the food grain program, which is still continuing even when we are well past COVID and the economy has recovered. So in that sense, the economic template that Modi-nomics is properly called has come to stay globally, and it has got global recognition. So those who printed currency and gave cash, which unfortunately is the model in states where Congress has come in Karnataka, for instance, is a retrograde step. And this has been now endorsed by no less than a gentleman called Nassim Taleb. And that bullishness on Modi and India particularly, I mean, I'll put it first India and then Modi. He's driving the seat today, but it's largely the aspiration of 1.4 billion, which has an upwardly mobile traction, which is driving India to the larger global head table. In that sense, it's not good news for opposition in India, which has repeatedly been talking about Modi in, that poor educational light. I guess these two voices will resonate deep here and abroad.
Rakesh ji there. Karthik, very important that we talk about in Nassim Nicholas Taleb's words as well as Neil de Grasse Tyson's words. He said that he didn't want to discuss too much space with him in the first place because there is Elon Musk to do that with him. But we're not even sure if Elon Musk discussed space with Modi. Who discussed space with Modi? We don't know. But certainly space is very important.
Absolutely, and I think Karan was very right in mentioning just now. Hi Karan, good to see you after a while, and thanks for being with us. But I think Karan was right. For the first time, we have opened our space sector to private exploration. It was a very, very closely guarded territory. It continues to be a strategic sector, but it was very, very closely guarded by ISRO and by the government of India. For the first time, we've opened the private sector, and we are also incubating startups to go ahead and create models that can compete with the SpaceX to develop reusable rockets, reusable launch vehicles, and go ahead and make the right investments in space exploration. So the timing is right, and it also comes at a point where end of this year, early next year, the Gaganyaan mission is likely to take off. This is going to be India's first manned mission to outer space, and yes, all eyes on that mission taking off, and those Air Force pilots coming back to India safe and sound to tell stories about their space exploration. So there is a lot that needs to be done when we talk about space exploration, and we don't even know the kind of possibilities that exist outside of our Earth as we know it. There's very little we know about outer space, and I agree with de Grasse that this is an area where Elon Musk, de Grasse himself, India, and the whole world has to collaborate and go ahead and see whether you talk about space tourism, whether you talk about minerals, whether you talk about life outside Earth in any form. I think these are questions that we have all toyed with, and we have all asked and never found believable answers to all our lives. And I think the time has come pretty much now to understand what beckons outside of the folds of the Earth.
Time has come, Amit, isn't it? Time has come for SpaceX in India.
Yes, and taking on from Karthik, Startup Phillip happened as recent as last week when a Gujarat-based Indo-German firm, Azista, launched its first remote sensing satellite from the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California, which is a part of Elon Musk's SpaceX Transporter 8 mission. This was launched atop a Falcon 9 rocket. So this was an Indian startup, Indo-German, which launched its first remote sensing satellite as recent as June of 14th.
Wow.
And that is where another Elon Musk linkage comes in. Right. So I believe he is very upbeat on the space industry in India.
Right. And Karan, if I were to ask you, your thoughts on, all these thought leaders that Prime Minister Modi met on day one, and the fact that this entire meeting, this entire state visit, is all leading up to one thing, and that is economics and business and the relationship, the business relationship that India and US share, because US till date is India's largest trade partner.
Right. So, I mean, if you look at Indo-US relations, a lot of the change started happening towards the late 1990s, when they realized that they need closer ties with India. And a lot of it is driven by people-to-people contact. Unlike our past relationship over here, we have a solid, number of diaspora there, which is active and which is, of course, becoming more and more prominent in American society. Now, as it turns out that, fast forward 20 years and you have India exactly where China was, say, 20 years back, 30 years back, which means that the scope of economic opportunity today has shifted from China to India. And Americans are smart. They recognize this shift, and probably they recognized it early on. And that's why they started, making early investments about 20 years back. And today, what we see happening is a culmination of those consistent, persistent efforts and investments that were made by leaders on both sides across party lines. That you have leaders such as Elon and eminent Americans across different fields, be it academia, be it industry, be it politics, essentially work to further this relationship and promote closer ties. So my sense is that over the next decade or so, we might see a lot more deepening of this relationship to the point that it might even overshadow, the relationship that China had with US at that point in time, say 20 years ago. And I think that would be an interesting trend to look out for. Whether it's reflected in tech transfer or not is a debatable issue. But what we can, be rest assured about is that the next 10 years would see a lot of investments come into India, which would also imply that the general level of prosperity in India is bound to increase and grow by leaps and bounds.